Thanks, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here today to talk to you guys about DER. This is what I do day to day. So, as Fernando mentioned, my name is Kamentha Pillay. I also go by Canning, but if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's what you'll find me as. I have been in the power industry for over 20 years, working in the utility space in various different capacities. Most of my time has been in design engineering, but now I'm managing a team of project managers that does DER. So we're connecting solar, any kind of DER to the grid at a distribution level. I've lived in Naperville for 16 years. I have 3 kids and a bunch of animals. And, I'm excited to talk to you guys about DER and what it can bring to Naperville. So let's see. Do I put it here? Oops. Oh, this one. Okay, so what are DERs? So really, and I should preface the presentation with this, right? I really want you guys to learn something new today. And so I know a lot of you might know a little bit about this, so we'll have time at the end for questions, but really I tailored this to like somebody who might not know that much about power or DERs, right? So what are DERs? They are small scale energy technologies that can be used to generate, store, and distribute electricity. So that's the definition, right? But what does that really mean? What does that mean to you on a day-to-day basis? So we kind of have to take a step back and think about, well, what is power generation, right? What is traditional power generation? And so the way that the system was designed over 100 years ago, right, is there's a plant that generates power and power flows in one direction. So you have transmission towers that are transmitting power over large spans. So you'll see those like in the middle of nowhere. Those are those big towers, right? And then those go down to the smaller towers, which we call distribution. Those are the ones like the wood poles that you see when you're driving around. Sometimes you see like metal poles, right? And then that goes to the load. So that'll be like your factories, your schools, your houses. And so we are generating power for people to consume on a day-to-day basis, 24/7. So this is what's been happening, for over 100 years. So there's different types of power generation, and they all came on at different times, right? As technology advanced, as new industries and new resources were available to us, right? So we started out with coal. Coal was the very first way that we were producing power in the 1880s. I think Kathy touched a little bit on coal earlier. And then also in the 1880s, hydro. So this is actually the Lockport hydroelectric plant. So if you've been down that way and you've seen this building before, that's what it is, right? They're generating power from water. And this is a clean way to produce power, right? It's sustainable. And then we've got natural gas. So that came around in the 1920s. Again, a fossil fuel. And we're starting to see fewer and fewer of those. We still do have some in Illinois though. And then of course, nuclear. So I happened to spend some time at Dresden Nuclear Station, which is right down the road. So of course I picked a picture of Dresden. And again, another source of clean, reliable energy. So all of these energy sources are working for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter what, right? No matter how much energy you're consuming, whether you turn on your oven or you plug in all of the devices, everybody's home, it's COVID, everybody's got all their devices plugged in, right? Or if you're on vacation and you're not using any power, all of these sources of generation are just constantly there and working for you. Okay, so then when we talk about DER, so again, if we go back to the definition, distributed energy resource, right? So before we looked at that power flow where it was just a straight line from generation all the way through. Now we're distributing things. So the model looks much more different and it's much more complex. So we've got all kinds of different things. So we still have like our traditional power plants that are generating electricity. We've got smart houses, we've got transportation, Here in the bottom, right, hydroelectric, we still have factories, we're starting to put in solar panels. We've seen an increase in wind in the last couple of years, right? So these are all things that contribute and are considered DERs, right? So each type, and I get into this at work a little bit too, right? But distributed energy resources is plural, but there are many different kinds, which is why we plural it again, right? So this is what we're talking about when we talk about DER, how everything is kind of connected, and it's all different types. So the types of DER that we have, right? We talked about solar. So this could be ground mounted, it could be community solar that you see out in more rural areas. It could be rooftop. We're seeing more and more rooftop developments in like the collar counties and neighborhoods around Chicago. So, and you know, like places around here even, right? Like we've got in Romeoville, all of those industrial complex, right? Like all those manufacturing facilities, a lot of those are putting up solar. There's building owners that are putting up solar on all of their buildings, right? So, and then you of course probably know as a homeowner that there are opportunities there as well. Right, there's also wind. So I can't remember where, but I know somewhere around here, there's like a car wash that has a windmill outside. Used to. Yeah, so small scale businesses can use wind. You could put a windmill in your backyard. I chose this picture because it showed the house and the windmill, right? I think a lot of people don't think about wind as an option, putting a windmill in your backyard or in the top of your house, right? But that is something that you can use as well. Biomass, so there's all different kinds of fuel resources, whether you're talking about crop waste, whether you're talking about food waste, you know, oil, animal waste. So there's all different types of biological things that we can then turn and convert into fuel. Batteries. So when we're talking about these types, especially solar, you know, this is something, and as I mentioned earlier, right, those big power plants, those are producing energy for you all the time, 24/7. Solar, you're only getting that when it's sunny. Wind, you're only getting that when it's windy, right? And so you need a way to be able to store that energy to use it later. And battery storage is a good way to do that. And then also EVs and chargers, right? So this, EVs and chargers are actually really interesting because you can use them in multiple ways. You, obviously you're plugging in your car to charge it so that you can drive somewhere. But you can also store energy. Let's say, for example, you have solar on your roof. You could charge the battery during the day and then discharge to your car at night, right? Replenishing your car battery. You could also, in case of emergencies, right, discharge from your car battery into your house if there was some kind of event, right? Or some kind of power outage and you needed that. So there's multiple ways that you can use this. And again, if you think about that, that diagram that I showed the slide before, where everything's kind of like interconnected and pushing and pulling, right? That's what DERs do, right? Yeah, go ahead.
On your previous graph, the one you say connected,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember seeing batteries in there.
No, it doesn't show everything on that. It was just to give you a high level overview of how things are connected.
Storage, it should be one of.
Yes, it should be. You're right. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, and then smart meters. So we probably all have smart meters on our homes. It's good to have a smart meter for many reasons, right? There's a lot of data that you're getting out of this, so you know when are you personally using electricity? Are you using it at peak times? Are you using it at not peak times? What are some things that you can do to adjust your own personal consumption? And then of course, home energy management. So this is no different than like if you have an Alexa app and you're already controlling your lights, or like a Nest and you're already controlling the temperature in your house, right? And there's many devices that all kind of work together. So these home energy management systems are really meant, like if you have multiple things going on at home, you can connect everything. It can all work together seamlessly and behind the scenes, and you can also look at it and control it remotely. So I really liked this visual. Because it shows you how we're moving from this, again, single, one-directional flow of energy power to, distributed energy resource power, right? And here, you can kind of see how everything is, coming in, going out as it needs. It's much more fluid, it's much more flexible, and it's also much more local than it was before. So why should we use DERs? Well, you have improved reliability and resiliency because it's more local, right? So I'll give you an example. I'm sure you guys probably all remember the storms that came through in July. We had like 43 tornadoes touch down in northern Illinois. And there were a lot of customers that were out of power, right? And it took down like huge transmission towers too, right? Like a whole line of them. And so if you have localized ways of producing power, if your neighbor is producing power and your grocery store is producing power, right? Those are all ways that you can increase your reliability and your resiliency as we start to see more of these weather events happening. Also mitigating climate change, right? And lowering emissions. I think that doesn't really need much explanation. But if you're reducing the amount of carbon that you're using by introducing a lot of these DERs, then that's obviously much better for the environment. And then the other benefit is lower energy costs. So what's in it for us? So as a resident, again, lower costs. There's a thing called net metering. I don't know if you guys have heard of that. It is basically you're getting a credit on your electric bill, right? You put solar panels on your roof or a wind turbine in your backyard. Somehow you're generating electricity at your house and you're getting a credit on your bill. There's a DG rebate, which is strictly for solar. It's something like $250 or $300 per kilowatt. So it's a one-time rebate that you can apply for if you put solar on your home.
What does that stand for, DG?
I think it's distributed generation, yeah. And then there's also storage rebates available. And then the other thing is community solar subscriptions. So I actually had no idea about community solar and how it worked until I was in my job, almost 2 years ago, when I first learned about it. So this is all those large scale community solar farms out in rural areas. You can subscribe to those and get a reduction on your energy bill. Yeah.
So community solar is actually banned in Naperville by the IMEA. We can't get it.
So
So that's-
nobody in this room
Yeah.
can sign up for that, but that is a thing.
Someday.
Yeah.
It's another reason not to sign the
Yeah.
contract extension because it would make everything stay the same.
Yeah,
Marine's unincorporated Naperville
Unincorporated Naperville can get it
can get it, yes.
because their comment customers can get it.
and then also it's beneficial for you, right? Because you can see how you're consuming and you can consume power differently, right? There's different rates depending on what time of day you're using electricity. And so that's, that's something that can work for you as a resident. Same thing for business owners, net metering, DG rebate, and storage rebates are available. DERMS is another solution. Again, I don't know if that's something that IMEA is interested in doing, but basically there's different use cases and you can, if you're a large business and you want to be generating your own power, but you don't want to have to pay all the upgrades like to connect to the grid and to upgrade the grid, there's different use cases where you are allowed to connect under certain conditions. And there's a microcontroller that monitors that, and it will curtail you if the conditions fall out of what you're supposed to be in. So it's a really cost-effective solution for businesses to do. And then if business owners decide to do like a full-scale DER setup, right, they would have the ability to island, which means that they could operate outside of the grid. So they could disconnect from the grid, they are self-sustaining, and can operate on their own. Again, when we're talking about all these weather events and storms and things like that, right? This is really advantageous, especially to businesses. And then, as a collective, right? So we're all getting lower costs. Our power is more reliable, it's generated locally, and we're reducing greenhouse gas.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there something in the news now where one of the technology companies wanted to go nuclear and basically do your Dermer Island, and the grid operator is pushing back, saying they're not paying the amount they should to keep the grid up, maintenance of the grid? Is that the?
There are small scale nuclear reactors, so it's expensive to build a nuclear plant, right? And there's a lot of regulations, but they have been working on small scale nuclear reactors, which is like in your neighborhood, or, you know, they're small. I don't know specifically of that example, so I'll have to look into it and find out more. Yeah. Good question, though. Okay, so DER in Illinois. So I wanted to touch on this a little bit before we kind of get into some of the graphs and statistics that I have, just so that you have an understanding of what's been happening in our local environment and in our state in the past couple of years. So CEJA was passed in 2021, and that has, hold on. That has significantly, sorry, I broke it. All right. So that has significantly changed with the passing of this law. This has significantly changed how Illinois is looking at clean energy and also being equitable to workforce development. So this is it's actually a 2-pager that they have, and I thought they could summarize it much better than I can. But you can see there's a lot in here about equity and workforce, energy access and solar for all. I don't know if you guys have heard of that program, Solar for All. But basically the state is investing into our communities across the state, right? With the intention or the goal of being zero carbon by 2030. All right, and then again, more renewable energy, energy efficiency, talking about carbon-free power, vehicles, electric transportation. And then I think this number 8 is also really, really important. When we talk about transitioning from the old way of doing things, which is like those coal plants or maybe those gas plants, right? There's a lot of skilled workers that we employ there. And how are we going to transition them into these new jobs, into the new way of doing things, right? So there's also something in here about making sure that those people who are our friends and our neighbors, right, that they're properly trained and transitioned into this the new way of doing things, which we call the energy transition. And then I actually thought this little bit was good too. So if you guys get a chance and you want to take a look at this and read it a little bit more in person, this is a good reference document. The law itself is very law-y, so you don't want to read it. But this is a really good overview of what the law is and how it applies to us. Okay. All right, so then next we're going to talk a little bit about, no, I'm sorry, I screwed it up. Okay, yeah. All right, so wanted to talk to you a little bit about what the portfolio looks like right now in the US versus Naperville. And I was told that this is an outdated pie chart. And also I apologize if they're not 2 line graphs, like this kind of drove me crazy, but you can see, right, from 2018 to 2024, natural gas is a pretty constant line, right? We're hovering right around that 35–40%. Coal has decreased significantly across the US, right? So from 30% in 2018 and trending downwards, like just a little bit above 15%, maybe that's like 18% in 2024. Nuclear is pretty constant, pretty steady. I would like to point out, even though the US portfolio is for nuclear is sitting at 20%, in Illinois, we have 6 nuclear power plants that produce energy for us, and it makes up 50% of the electricity that we have here in Illinois. So we are in a position to have really good, clean, reliable energy available to us. But we don't subscribe to that right now, right? So we're not sitting anywhere near this 20%. Solar, you can see there's an increase from 2018 through 2024, so a little bit over 5%. And then of course, wind is also increasing, right? So if you think about like where we are now and where we want to go, there's still a gap, right? If you take all of these, especially with the decrease in coal, you know, we still have a ways to go before we make up that gap with solar and other types of DER. And then, so the pie chart that I have here, this talks a little bit about the IMEA portfolio, which is what we currently have here in Naperville. And you can see there's like more than 80% is generated by coal. So we are far surpassing what we should be, both in terms of, you know, the nation and then also the state, right? So it's not what it could be, and we have it available to us, right? So those are things to think about. And then of course we've got like about 11% in wind and hydro and solar. Okay, so how does this tie into our Naperville goals? So Naperville has a greenhouse gas goal, right, reduction that we're trying to implement, right? But our current electricity provider, IMEA, is 80% coal, right? And they don't really have any plans showing how they're going to make a quantifiable change in that. Nest has proposed a 45% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030 to be able to reach this target of like 60% less, right? And so if you look at these two graphs, right, this one on the left shows electricity, natural gas, and then also mobile sources, so cars and vehicles, right? And you can see there was a significant spike in like 2011, 2012, when we signed the IMEA contract and, you know, switched to mostly coal consumption. And it also shows the graph on the right, how much we'll have to reduce it year over year in order to meet our goal in 2036. So it's a pretty aggressive goal, and as of right now, there's no plan on how we're going to reach that. All right, and then everyone's favorite topic, right? What about the cost? So this is some data that I found. You can see in 2010, right, the cost of solar per, this one's per megawatt hour. So the cost of solar per megawatt hour in 2010 was $378. In 2019, it had dropped to 68. I don't know what the current statistic is, what it currently costs to produce a megawatt hour of solar, but I would imagine that it's continuing to drop, right? You can see offshore wind has also decreased. Coal has stayed about the same. Nuclear has gone up a little bit, and then onshore wind also decreased. And then the graph on the right talks more about, okay, so the yellow bar, let me take a step back. The bars are the number of installations. So you can see from 2010 up until 2023, that has increased significantly. I can tell you, if you are looking at solar in Illinois, the graph is exponential, right? I can tell you my team, last year we had 100 community solar projects that we were managing. Right now, we're up to 480. So, and no like slowdown in that growth at all. We're projecting constant growth until 2039, right? So that's ComEd, not not IMEA, but you can see that there's an appetite for solar in Illinois. And it's available to us if we want it, right? So again, getting back to the cost savings, the first line chart, the first line represents the cost to residential owners. And then the green represents commercial and like businesses. And the orange represents utilities. So you can see there's significant cost savings, like if utilities are participating in solar development and using that as a source of energy, that gets turned around and passed on to you as a consumer of that energy, right? So there's significant cost savings here. And again, this is just solar. This is not talking about all the other types of DER. All right, and then wanted to talk a little bit about examples around us, right? So we do have neighborhoods like our neighbors who are leading the charge in this, right? In Aurora, for example, they have an initiative, they wanna lead and become net zero. I forget what year they said, but they're putting a lot of things in place to try to become carbon free. And one of the things that they're doing, they're developing these 2 smart neighborhoods. So they are using a combination of solar, battery, to, create this neighborhood and manage this neighborhood and increase efficiencies. They broke ground on it last year, 2023. I'm not sure when they're gonna be fully available for people, but again, right? Our neighbors leading the way in this. Microgrids are also a thing. This is actually a project that my team worked on and finished this year. So the Bronzeville Community Microgrid in Chicago. This is the largest and the first public housing authority in the entire nation that put in a microgrid. So they have we put in a combination of solar panels on the roof, ground mount solar panels. We've got battery, and then not operational on a day-to-day basis, but if needed, there are some gas peaker generators that are part of the microgrid as well. So again, like we talked a little bit about weather changes. If something were to happen in the city of Chicago, the whole grid goes out, guess what? Bronzeville can bring everybody back up again. It's not just the housing authority, right? It's the whole community can come back up. So most of the work happened here at the housing authority, which is why it was the first of the nation, but the microgrid in and of itself is benefiting the entire community. And then another neighbor of ours, right? G&W Electric Company in Bolingbrook. They also have a microgrid. So their entire campus, their manufacturing facility, their entire campus can be islanded, which we talked about in an earlier slide. So they have a combination of solar, battery, and they have a flywheel, again, that can be used to generate in case of emergency or if the grid goes down, right? And they can disconnect from the grid and they're self-sustaining. And I think they can operate their manufacturing facility for something like 3 days or 2 days or something with like nothing, just based on what they have now, not generating any extra power. So these are really great examples that are close by that we can learn from. Yeah.
Why do you modify? Is that really operational or just demonstration?
No, it's not demonstration. It's fully operational.
How many flywheels?
I think it's just one. Yeah, but it's big.
Flywheels for inertia, right?
Yes.
So storage, flywheel is for storage.
No, well, you can store. Yeah, it's dual purpose. But
It's storage, but what do you do with this?
because then when you need it, then right, you let that energy go and then you're
So it's
generating.
battery.
Yeah, it's another form, but that's what they have, right? So they've got solar, they've got a flywheel, and they've got battery at their campus. So this is basically the end of my presentation, right? So I think we live in a really great community. Naperville is consistently ranked one of the top places to live, one of the top places to raise your kid. I think that, we lead the way in so many areas when it comes to schools, parks, restaurants, all kinds of things, right? We're really fortunate to live here and to have the opportunities that we have. And I think that we should also be thinking about how are we leading the way in the future, right? How are we making things sustainable, not only for our kids, but our grandkids and generations to come? And how do we market that, right? People want to live in a place where not only can they go out to eat, but they know that they're making a difference in their day-to-day life by living in a community. So that's all that I have for this presentation. I want to thank you guys all for listening to me. Hopefully you learned something.